My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
What the f*** do you mean what am I talking about? Out here talking you! Minor league mother is what you are. I'll tell you guys something right f***ing now. It's not easy to be a f***ing champion, all right? It's the hardest f***ing thing there is to do. Are you guys that f***ing good? You're not. I'll tell you that right the f*** now. Wise up. Buddy, go ahead and say what the f*** you want to say.
Welcome back to 86, the Wally Backman Show. I'm Bruce Jacobs, and as we build up to the crescendo, which is the 86 World Championship, we started in 1980, and who better to bring on a guy who covered all angles of baseball, executive, scout, player. If there was a position, he covered it. He is Ed Lynch, former New York Met, former GM of the Chicago Cubs, former assistant GM of the New York Mets as well. And Ed, you are our first guest. Welcome to 86, the Wally Backman Show. It is a pleasure, sir. How are you?
Well, very good. I feel very honored with that distinction. So thanks for having me on.
It is a pleasure. Listen, we're doing a build up to 86, and Wally and I talked, and we both agreed that a lot of the seeds were laid in 1980. Mookie Wilson, Wally Backman, and a few others, and that's where it started to germinate. When you got traded from Texas and you were going to the Mets, did you say to yourself, God, this franchise is awful, man. I'm never going anywhere.
No, I didn't. Well, the thing that's odd about being a player is when I'd rather get traded to the New York Mets in that era than the Philadelphia Phillies, because I knew I was going to have a chance to show what I could do if I went to a bad club. And the Mets were a bad club. And so, as a player, I was thrilled. It was my hometown. Had a lot of relatives that still live there. Went to Shea Stadium, grew up in the stands in Shea Stadium. So to me, it was like heaven sent. I couldn't have been more thrilled.
Nice. Hey, Eddie, I got a question for you real quick. I'm shooting forward from 80. I think in 80, it was you went up a couple of days before me, and then Mookie and Hubie and myself, we came up together in 1980. We met. I know that I met the team in Dodger Stadium, but what was that experience like when you first got called to the big leagues?
Well, it was interesting. I got called when we got called to the big leagues. Joe McDonald was still the general manager, I believe, and he tried to pull a fast one on myself and Hubie Brooks when we got called to the big leagues. He made us sign a letter saying that we would waive certain rights that we had under the basic agreement. That if we went back down, we would have gotten a bigger salary. It's kind of technical stuff. And they asked me, and I didn't have an agent, and I said, "Hey, where do I sign?" And so I signed, and I came up under those circumstances. But, that AAA team, Wally, we had in 1980, we had you, we had Mookie, we had Hubie, myself, Mike Scott. There was a lot of talent on that team, and we finished 6th, I think. We had just a terrible manager, Frank Verdi. He was brutal.
Eddie, he hit me third in the lineup.
Much, but
hit me third in the lineup.
Well, you might have been our best hitter, so that's where you put the best hitter.
We had
right?
good players. It was a core that was coming to the big leagues for sure. we started off in, 83, I think, 84. We really showed that we might be somebody, but Frank Cashin built that team through the organization, I think, which was a great thing. And that was a start of success.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really three ways to build a club. You do it through trades, you do it through player development, or you do it with free agents. And he didn't really have much luck in the free agent part of it. George Foster was not really didn't really live up to the hype. But in the draft, he drafted guys like you. He drafted you were a little before him, but Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry and all these quality players. Then in trades, we got Ron Darling and Walt Terrell. Then we got Howard Johnson for Walt Terrell. Then we got Keith Hernandez for Rick Ownby and Neil Allen. And all of a sudden, like in '83, I think we lost 90 games. And then in '84, all of a sudden, we're like really good. I mean, we surprised a lot of people, and we were so young too. So that was the thing. But I'll go back to when I got called to the big leagues. I never had a relief appearance in the minor leagues. So I get called to the big leagues. I fly from Norfolk to San Francisco in coach because I hadn't signed my contract yet. So I go out that night, the next day, and I have my first relief appearance as a professional. I give up 4 runs, and I don't pitch for 13 days. Ooh. I sit in that bullpen for 13 days. So after about 10 days, I went into Joe Torre's office. I said, Joe, am I ever going to pitch again? He goes, you're pitching Saturday against the Cubs. And I started, and I won September 13th. So that's how bad that team was. I mean, it was really bad. But you know what? We got a chance to play Wally, right? And Wally came up, and of course, he's 20 years old, and he hits 320. I mean, how many guys do that? But it was an opportunity for us to play, and that's all we were asking for.
I saw on that roster, there was some other good talent. I mean, Steve Henderson, even though he got traded for a legend, he was a good baseball player. He could really rake, solid power. There was talent. Is that in '80? Both of you guys, did you see, or were you just so young and happy to be in the big leagues? But when you looked around, did you start to see the talent is? There's starting to be some real talent here. This is not, fly by night. This thing could start to germinate and start to get bigger and better. Both of you guys could address that for me.
Well, I mean, for me, it was a daily struggle of survival, But, I mean, I remember we played the Phillies. It seemed like we played the Phillies 10 times in September that year, and they were the eventual world champions. So, I mean, I'm looking at our roster, and I'm looking over there at Mike Schmidt, and I'm looking at Greg Luzinski and Maddox and Pete Rose and, all these Steve Carlton, Tug McGraw. And so I knew we had a ways to go after watching those guys play.
What about you, Wally?
No, it was an interesting time. I felt that we weren't very good that year in '80, but the core of the players, we had good players, and Eddie's totally right about Frank Verde, our manager. God rest his soul, but it just was a little bit different type of manager. But as we went on, and I think you go past '83, I think we got together as a group. In '84, everything started to roll. I mean, I'll just make it short and quick. But if you go from '84 through the '88 season, if it was in today's schedule, we'd have been in the playoffs every year, and we would have had a chance to win all those years because we were a good team.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if they had the wild card back then, Wally, if they had the wild card in '84, we're going in to play a short series, and we're running Dwight Gooden and Ron Darling and Sid Fernandez out there in a 3-game series. They don't have a chance. I mean, we could have won the World Series every year in '84, '85, '86.
'87, you would have made the playoffs. '88, you did make the playoffs. Yeah, I was. If we had 6, and you would have been a very solid, probably had home field in '85, first round, whatever that meant. But absolutely, if they had the same format, even if they only had the one extra wild card, you would have been in the one game, in that. So, I guess you were just born a couple of years too soon to go to the playoffs that often. So I want to go to a game you pitched I think it was 1984 Chicago Cub doubleheader, August 7th.
yeah.
You remember that game?
Oh, very well.
Tell me something. Was that game, if you remember that, was that game a doubleheader and it was Banner Day?
Yeah, well, I remember it very well. I mean, we could not beat, Wally will attest to this, we could not beat the Cubs in Wrigley Field that year. I think we were 1-8 against them. But I remember we went in there, it was a doubleheader, and it was nothing worse than pitching at Wrigley Field. You're sitting in the clubhouse, and the wind is howling. You know, you wake up in the morning at Wrigley Field, and you know every flag memorized in that city, which way the wind's blowing. And if it's hot, it's blowing out. And it was hot. And I remember sitting in the clubhouse during batting practice. I'm pitching the second game. Ron Darling's pitching the first game. And guys are coming in from BP going, man, the ball's flying. I'm just dying, you know. And then Ronnie goes out in game one, and you can look it up. And I asked Ronnie about this, and he agreed with me. I think he had the worst outing of his entire career in game one of that doubleheader. He gave up 8 runs in 2 1/3. So now he's in the clubhouse. He's really young. He's in the corner. I'm still waiting to go. I'm like in the corner, you know, rocking back and forth. And Ronnie comes in, and he's like, I stink. You know? So I went out in the second game, and I got him out in the first, got him out in the second, ground ball double, broken bat, home run. Ron Say hits a double. I said, that's enough of this. So Junior Ortiz is catching, and Keith Moreland's the hitter, and I went out playing with those guys later on, and Moreland was in the on deck circle, and he turned to Jody Davis, and he said he hit the donut off his bat. He said, he's going to hit me, and I'm going to go out and get him. And, you know, I never threw up here at anybody. I just don't think that's right. But I hit him right in the ass. You know, I just threw a ball right behind him, ass high, hit him in the ass, and he comes running out. And Wally, you were probably at second base. And, you know, I'm going to stick and move and win by points. And he comes in low. You know, he played football at Texas, hits me in the legs. We go down. There's like 10 tons of beef on top of us. And I'm at the bottom. It's like when you're a kid, you're like, get off. You know, I couldn't breathe. And they got us all off. And the most amazing thing about that was when everything was settled, it looked like a yard sale. There were gloves and hats and shoes everywhere. And then I get it back on the mound, and I'm facing the next hitter, and Keith Moreland's at first base. Neither one of us got thrown out. You didn't get fined, nothing.
Wow.
And, yeah, and so I got a lot of death threats that night at the hotel. But, again, we could not beat those guys. We were so young, Walter, and they were such a veteran club that we just had no chance.
They were, I'm going to go back, Eddie, into our younger part of our career, because, you know, pitchers and players, the pitchers go out on the field, whatever, a half hour early, do their stretching, do their long toss, do their throwing program, whatever it might be. And I remember in 1983 when we were starting to become a better team, I used to see you hanging around Tom Seaver all the time. Tell me something about Tom Seaver that I might not know, even though we were teammates that year.
Well, people ask me, was Tom a nice guy? I was like, no, not really. He was Tom Seaver. You know, it's like hanging out with Julius Caesar, for Christ's sakes. You know, he was a god to me. You know, he give me shit every day. I don't know if I can curse on this, but he gave me shit every day, you know, and because he knew I could take it and I'd laugh it off. He'd come in and say, hey, Ed, congratulations. I say, why, Tom? You're leading the league in incomplete games. Thanks. Appreciate that. And then, you know, 2 weeks later, he comes in and he goes, hey, man, you have a lot of courage. I admire you. I say, really, Tom? Why? He goes, to go out there with that shit you're throwing, you got to be a brave man.
Oh, man.
But he did it. He never did it to the point where he was going to insult somebody. He did it, you know, as camaraderie. So finally I said, you know, Tom, if I had your stuff, I'd have better career numbers than you. And he just laughed his ass off. He thought that was great. But, you know, we all think, Wally, you were there, you saw, we all thought he had a terrible year. You know, you looked at it later. The win-loss wasn't good because we weren't very good, but I think he threw 230 innings with like a 3.6 or something like that. And I'll tell you what.
You'd beg to have 5 starters that did that.
Oh, my God. And can you imagine if we didn't lose him in that stupid-ass compensation draft they had back in the day where they put every team had to put players in a pool, and then the team that lost a free agent gets to pick out of that pool. So we're a last place team. When we put a guy in a pool, we lose a last place team, and because the first place team lost a player, it was silly.
You know where the Mets got lucky. In '86, a lot of people. He was on the roster of the Boston Red Sox in the World Series, but he could not play. Let me just say, and you can see his jersey in the background. He is my all-time favorite, okay? But I'll back up. I went to a symposium. It was him, Tim McCarver, Marty Glickman, if you remember him, great New York sports voice. And they were giving a symposium at the New York Broadcasting Hall of Fame. And I went up to Tom for an autograph, and he said no. And he barely looked at me. That he did me a favor. I never sought another autograph again, by the way, so I was never disappointed. But, man, when you're sitting there talking to McCarver, Seaver, Glickman on baseball and whatever, I mean, that's Hall of Fame right there. That's big time.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's another guy, my first pitching coach, Bob Gibson. And, Wally, you were there for that.
Oh, man.
God rest his soul, but what a miserable human being,
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
The difference between Seaver and Gibson was if you ask Seaver for his autograph, he says no. You ask Gibson, he's going to say, no, now get the hell out of my face, something like that. He was it wasn't an act. But Tom was a class act. But he was very strong in his convictions. But, man, if we didn't lose him, if we go into 1985 and we've got Dwight Gooden, Ron Darling, Sid Fernandez, Tom Seaver, and whoever maybe is the fifth guy, I mean, would he have been a great leader on that 85 club if we didn't lose him in that draft? Oh, my goodness.
God, if he could,
would have been huge.
We would have won the World Series, in my opinion. We certainly would have won the division.
No doubt.
So,
how about this, Wally? Eddie, your first win was to snap a 13-game Mets losing streak. In light of the Chicago White Sox, maybe you want to talk about that too. They fired their manager today. They lost 20. They tied the AL record 21 in a row. But here you are. You're trying to get a W. You're on the mound. You lose 13 games. Hell, you lose 3 games in a row in New York, and they're after you. 13. I can only imagine the pressure of that game. You got to break this losing streak, man. Otherwise, who knows when it ends?
Yeah, I mean, there was enough pressure on me as a young pitcher. It was my first start in the big leagues. And, I didn't really think about that kind of thing. And Wally will attest to this. I mean, you're just happy to be there. And, my wife said to me this morning, boy, those young players on the White Sox must be miserable. I said, yeah, well, you know what? They're getting a chance to play. It's better than sitting on the bench for the Guardians or the Dodgers. You're getting out there and get a chance to play. So I really didn't feel that pressure, but, I still have the scorecard that Joe Torre signed for me, the end of the 13th loss or something like that. And so I was just happy to have a chance.
I think that was the way for everybody, Bruce. When you first got called to the big leagues, I remember, Joe Torre, of course, was our manager in 1980, and I flew in with Mookie Wilson and Huey Brooks. I think Eddie went a couple of days before us when we got called up, and about 20 minutes before the game, we were late getting in there, and Joe says, Wally, how you feel? And I said, I feel great. He says, well, you're playing. I didn't even get to take batting practice. And I was hitting 8 that day. And
who were you facing?
Joe,
you remember?
I remember, Eddie. Believe it or not, remember. I got a base hit my first time up, struck out my second time up, hit a double off the wall my third time up. The best thing is they had flown my parents in to watch the game, and I didn't know it. But I thought I hit a home run, and I didn't hit home runs, but I hit it off the top of the wall in left center in Dodger Stadium, and I ended up scoring. And Joe Torre was standing on the top step, and he says, that should have been a triple. And it was from that time on, he was right. I was 20 years old. I played hard for the guy. Great person, well deserving of what he's become. But yeah, no, there was some times that were just fantastic. I think early in the career, you get the jitters on opening day. But Eddie, I got a question, and I have a lot of questions for you. But do you think the Mets have got a chance to win with that starting pitching staff this year to go very far in the playoffs?
Man, I'll tell you what. I've given this a lot of thought. I did some homework today. First, let me talk about the '86 Mets for 1 minute. People say, "Gee, why was that team so good? How did you win 108 games?" Well, I got traded earlier in that year. I think I'm the only guy that pitched for that team and against that team. But they were first in the league in runs scored, first in on-base percentage, first in OPS, first in OPS plus. On the pitching side, they were first in ERA, second in fewest runs allowed. So when you don't give up any runs and you're leading the league in runs, you're going to win a lot of games, all right?
You're a pretty good team.
Yeah, so the 2024 Mets, their rotation is 17th in ERA, and their bullpen's 17th in ERA. They're 18th in WHIP, meaning walks and hits per innings pitch. How many guys are they letting get on base? That's a big indicator. So the only way I can give hope is that living here in Arizona, the Diamondbacks, after the All-Star break last year, I think went 5-25. They lost, I looked it up today, they lost 9 games in a row that ended on August 11th. So on August 11th of last year, they were 57-59, and they wound up going to the World Series and almost winning the World Championship. So, the old saying is with this extra wild card, it's not who you're playing, it's when you're playing them. So if the Mets can, get hot and get into the postseason, anything can happen. But I just don't see that step up number one guy. I don't see the depth in their bullpen. I mean, Edwin Diaz was the best reliever in baseball, and he's still trying to get back there, and he might. But Diaz, Diekman, Ottavino, some of those veterans are struggling. And, when your pitchers are averaging under 6 innings a start, you got 4 innings every night that you have to put a reliever out there. And those guys get tired and they get worn out. And so if you're having problems in your bullpen, it gets ugly. So I root for them. I root for them all the time, but I'm just not confident they're the elite in the National League.
I do too, Eddie, and I always have, since I first signed with them in 1977. But it takes such a big toll on that bullpen.
Oh, man.
And people don't know that you might have a guy up twice, and even sometimes they get a guy up 3 times during the course of a game. So all, those bullpen guys, they throw 60, 70 innings, but they've thrown that many innings down in the bullpen.
That's right.
So it's always tough.
That's right. And I think there's a tendency in our game now, and I'm not disparaging anybody. I had my chance to run an organization 25 years ago. I ran it the way I wanted to run it. Things are different now. So analytics is a big part of it. And, the pitching philosophy, every pitch is thrown at maximum effort. Every breaking ball is thrown at maximum spin rate. Try to strike everybody out, stay away from contact. When you have guys out there throwing every pitch as hard as they can, and they're snapping pitches off as hard as they can, and they're pitching away from contact, you're going to have injuries. And, that's what we got in our game. Our game is being not destroyed, but seriously hampered by injuries. I just worry about the pitching side of it. Position players, you guys do what you want to do. I don't care. But, pitchers are a different breed. And again, when you have 4 innings every night, 162 games a year, where you got to have relievers out there, there's going to be injuries.
I just want to ask you about 2 other moments in your career, Ed. We're talking to Ed Lynch, former New York Met, former New York Met assistant manager, former general manager of the Cubs. In '86, when you went down early with the injury, did you think at the time, man, this might be my best chance to win a world championship? I mean, all signs after going, 85 in the end with the Cardinals, going into 86, I think the Mets were a heavy favorite. They wound up winning the division by a ton of games. I don't know that they surprised anybody. But when that happened, what did you feel at that time?
Well, I mean, I hurt my knee pretty bad in spring training. I tried to pitch through it. I pitched one outing in Philadelphia, like 2 1/3. I woke up the next day, my knee was like the size of a basketball, and I had surgery, rehabbed it with the team, then went down on a 2 week or back in those days, I think it might have been a 2 or 3 week rehab to Tidewater. And I'm going down there, and the Mets started off like 4-5 that year or something. And then they won like 28 out of 31 or some ridiculous number. I mean, the race was over. And Wally was there. The race was over by June, basically. So I knew this team was going to the postseason. But I'm looking at the roster. I'm down in AAA, and I'm looking at the roster. And I had just won an arbitration case the winter before. So Frank Casher was not real fond of me at that time. So I'm looking at the roster. The last pitcher on the team was Rick Aguilera. And we all knew how good he was going to be. And he's making like $38,000, and I'm making $530,000. So, I mean, I'm smart enough to know that when my time is up on that rehab assignment, I'm not going back to New York. I didn't think I'd be released because I had a pretty good year in '85. But I remember on the day before my rehab was up, I actually got a call from my father-in-law, and he said, "Hey, have you seen the New York Times today?" I said, "No." So I went downstairs in the hotel, got a paper. It said, "Lynch trade expected today." As soon as I read that, the phone rang. It was like a movie, And it was Al Harrison. And Al Harrison said, "Ed, we made a trade with the Cubs." And I just said, "Oh, thanks, Al." Whack, And like 2 minutes later, I get a call from Dallas Green, the late, great Dallas Green. And he couldn't have been better. And I went over there, and I was in shock, really, because I went from worst to first. And, my first game in Chicago, Gene Michael's the manager. And I walk in, it's like the 5th inning. And like the 7th inning, he goes, can you pitch today? I said, "Sure." He goes, "Okay, if it's tied after 9, we go extra innings, you're the pitcher in the 10th. So I go down there with us hitting in the bottom of the 9th. It's a tie game. We don't score, and I'm walking on the field, and the umpire's waving his arms. And I go, "What's up?" He goes, "Oh, it's game's called because of darkness." And to me, it was like a movie, There was no lights. And I thought it was still fine, but they were worried about the bottom of the inning, nobody could see. So they just called the game, and I'm standing out there, everybody's running off the field. And it was a culture shock. But I got treated great over there. We're really good people. I'm still very good friends with a lot of them. And, when I interviewed with Andy McPhail for the GM job, he said, one of the things I'm looking for is somebody with an attachment to the Chicago Cubs. So if I had never been traded over there, maybe I don't get that job. So that's the way I look at it.
Last one. I want to ask you, when you got to be assistant GM of the Mets, and then the season closed down in '94, that was a strike year. What was it like to be in a front office of a baseball team when the thing was shutting down? That's my last question.
Yeah, it was strange. I remember we were in Philadelphia when the strike hit, and we had a charter plane going from Philadelphia back to New York. Why it wasn't a bus, I don't know. But they wouldn't let the players on the plane. So I was the assistant GM. John Barr, who was a scouting director, him and I were the only 2 passengers on this charter jet going from Philadelphia to New York.
Well, that's creepy.
And then it lasted, the whole summer. And then Bud Selig had to call off the World Series. It was a strange year. And then, I'm in the office in October, and we're, trying to make plans if this thing gets settled. And that's when I got a call from Andy McPhail, and I interviewed in Chicago. I also interviewed in St. Louis for that job. And then I decided to take the Cub job because it was, just a great opportunity. So it's hard to believe that was 30 years ago.
Eddie, I got one more question for you because it relates to what happened to me as well. What was it like? And what was it like when you got traded for the first time?
Oh, man. Well, the first time I got traded, I was with the Rangers, in the minor leagues. Ronnie Darling and I both were Rangers originally. I got traded in 79. He came over in 82, but that didn't really count because, I was still a young guy. I was in the minor leagues. And I remember I went home. I'm getting ready to go to instructional league with the Rangers in St. Pete, and I'm at my parents' house, and the phone rings, and it's Joe Klein. I remember that name.
Oh yeah,
He was
Joe,
the
I know
minor
him.
league director, and he said, "Hey Ed, how you doing?" I said, "Good, Joe. I thought he was going to call me about instructional league. Hey, when are you leaving? Blah blah blah." He goes, "Hey Ed, we just made a deal with the Mets." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Why is he telling me this? Well, why is he telling me?" You know? And I went, "Oh my God, I've been traded." It was shock. And
No,
but I tell young players all the time, I've traded players, I've been around players who've been traded, and they take it as like some sort of rejection, and I try to tell them, hey, listen, especially if you're in a big deal involving big players, like if you're going to a team that gave up a good player to get you, hey, number one, you're going to a team that wants you. And number
correct.
two, they're going to make that trade look good, man. They're going to push you along. They want you to get to the big leagues so they can say, hey, look, we got Ed Lynch or Wally Backman in that trade, and now he's in the big league. So I tell them it's the best thing that's ever happened to you in your entire life. You just don't realize it yet. And
Yeah, you don't, Eddie. I remember when I got traded. I was 17 years old when I was a first round pick for the Mets, and played through '88, and then they traded Minnesota Twins. I thought I went back to AAA, Eddie. Hey, buddy.
Well, we also thought
I want
about
to
it.
seriously thank you for coming on and being our first guest, buddy.
Absolutely.
Love you, man.
Love you too. Anytime you want me, I'm available.
Thank you, Ed.
All right,
Appreciate
Eddie.
it.
Thanks, buddy.
Let's go Mets, huh?
There you go, baby. There you go.
Okay, let's go.
It's a fucking team effort. Do it.
All right, appreciate Eddie Lynch coming on the show. Wally, that sounds like, man, there's a guy who his memory is unbelievable. Some of the things, Bob Gibson. How much do you guys, if you see each other, by the way, we want to thank Ed Lynch for coming on. How much do you guys, every time you see it, do you go back into the Wayback Machine?
We do. We reminisce a lot. Eddie and I go way back, all the way from the minor leagues to the big leagues to, Eddie got traded for the first time. We talked about that a little bit, but Eddie's a great guy, very knowledgeable person about the game of baseball in all aspects of the game. And trust me, Bruce, I really appreciate Eddie Lynch being our first guest this year.
Yeah. By the way, 10-8 he was in '85, which was his best season, and then going into '86, as he mentioned, his knee crumbled, and that was the end of it, man. But it did set a career path for him.
Yeah, it had been hard for him. He knew we had a great team in '86, and we traded him after he pitched 4 or 5 games, whatever it might have been. But I wish, and to believe it or not, to give the Wilpons a little bit of credit, Eddie only pitched for a short time in '86 for us, but they gave him a World Series ring, and I think it was well deserved for what he had done up until that point, in the past and things like that.
All right. Wally, speaking of the past, your old friend, beat reporter, I think he's been around many of media outlets in New York, Anthony DiComo, put together what he called the definitive list. And it's the top 5 second basemen in New York Mets history, okay? I want to go through this with you, and then I'm going to give you where I think, and I want you folks to know I feel no added pressure since Wally's my partner here. I don't feel any added pressure, but I'm going to tell you where I think Wally stands in Met history as far as second baseman. I'm going to start at number 5. Wally, see if you want to react to any of these. Number 5 was Felix Millan, who the Mets picked up from Atlanta. The only thing I'll say about Felix, I don't know how he ever hit the ball, Wally. He had the weirdest batting stance. It was like he was a left-handed hitter, so his right arm was like over. I used to wonder, how does he see the ball?
He was, you know what? I can start right now. I don't have any bad feelings about Felix Millan is a great guy. I do fantasy camp with Felix Millan, and I love Felix to death. He's funny. Felix getting a little bit older, but we all are, but what a great guy.
Yeah, Felix was a good player. He was a good baseball player, good, solid baseball player. Number 4, Wally. DiComo listed Jeff Kent. For me, only 4 years as a Met. A lot of contentious. I did not have him in my top 5. Now, he turned out to be a heck of a baseball player his years in San Francisco. But I do not have him in my top 5. DeComo did. He had him at number 4. Thoughts?
Power hitting second baseman. It didn't play that long for the New York Mets. What did they accomplish in his 4 years? Not a whole lot.
Yep. Number 3. Anthony DeComo had you listed at number 3.
Well, everybody has their own opinion. I'm curious to hear later who's 2 and 1 because
Okay,
I know
let me go right to it. And I'll give you what I think of that. Number 2, he's got Daniel Murphy. He bases a lot of this on that Cubs series where Murphy just destroyed the Chicago Cubs. But, Wally, he did not have a good World Series. People don't remember that against the Royals. He beat the Cubs first virtually single-handedly, but he did nothing against the Royals.
Well, you know what? Murph played for me last year, and when he was trying to make his comeback, I love Daniel Murphy. His defense is very shaky. But, he got him. What he did against the Cubs that year is second to none. My whole point to all this stuff, however people try to pick this stuff out, and I think I know where you're going, but shit, there's only been 2 of us that were on a world championship team for the New York Mets. And I believe that's
true.
Boswell and myself.
That's absolutely correct. Only 10. That's right.
And so, you can pick. Everybody has their own opinion. What did you bring to the table as a player? As a player, I was a guy that had to set the table. So Keith Hernandez and Darryl Strawberry, they could drive in runs. Me and Lenny Dykstra set the table for our big hitters in the lineup, Gary Carter, and Hernandez and Strawberry and those guys. And so it was big. We had to set the table. We did our job, and that's why we won.
Yeah. Wally, you're being a little humble. He's got Edgardo Alfonso at number 1, and there's not a Met fan alive that doesn't love Fonzie, and I'm sure you know him well, and he's such a good guy. But I didn't put him at number 1, Wally, and I'm not doing this because you're my partner. For me, you're number 1, and here's why. I have distinct reasons why. The big thing with Alfonso, he's looked at his numbers with runners in scoring position, and that's great. But he played 515 games at second and 520 games, I'm rounding up, at third. You didn't play third half your career. You played second. That's number 1. I looked up your postseason numbers. You may have not destroyed the Cubs like Daniel Murphy, but you hit 330 in the World Series. It's not like you were sitting there like chopped meat, okay? Not because you're my friend, not because you're my partner. Yes, Murphy's series against the Cubs was amazing, and Edgardo was a great player. Hit a big home run against the Diamondbacks right here in the National League, not in the division series, okay, right here in Arizona. But since he played half his time at third, Wally, you are the Mets' all-time best second baseman, in my opinion.
You don't. I appreciate that very much, Bruce. But you know what? I think we were all really good. All the names are really good names, and everybody has their own opinion. And, I look at the importance of winning. Winning is supposed to be number 1. I'll go a little bit past this. I think Frank Cashin built a team that was incredible. Did I like platooning with Tim Tuffle in the World Series and during the season? Absolutely not. But Timmy was an asset. But I was always fighting to get the job to play every day. But, a little competition between people is really good. But I think they're all good names. I think the one name that's left out is, what the Mets did in '69. Boswell was the second baseman. He was a big part of success for that team. So I don't care if you leave this guy as an honorable mention. He's not honorable mention. He's way up the stack. To go past
DeComo. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm coming at you in a minute.
No, I was going to say DeComo put for honorable mention Greg Jeffries. I'm sorry, Wally. He may be number 1 in terms of needing a psychologist. Wally, he drove us Met fans. I mean, he was just any list that includes him, I can't put a lot of stock in, Wally. I'm sorry.
Greg Jeffries could swing the bat. You could hit him 100 ground balls and he might catch 75 of them. You know what that fielding percentage is? It's not very good. And then you didn't know if he could throw the ball to first base. I love the guy. And we still talk once in a while, but he knows he was horse shit as a defender. And that's why I got traded after the 88 season when I went to Minnesota, was to open a spot for him. I'll never forget Joe McIlvain calling me into the hotel and saying, well, Wally, if this happens and this happens, we're going to put you on the block to trade you. And I'm like, Joe, I do not want to be a part of this team if I'm not going to play second base. And so they did trade me to Minnesota, one of my biggest regrets I ever have.
Interesting. Well, I got your back, and I'm sure, Wally, you got my back all the time, too.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's go to last week, on the Noah Syndergaard thing.
Okay.
I did a little bit of homework. You said he never apologized to the fans.
No, he owes me an apology.
No, he don't owe you an apology. You owe him an apology.
I owe him an apology?
Yes, I seen my homework, and I hope we can bring this up on video, where he actually said to the New York Mets fans that he appreciated his 6 years with the New York Mets.
No, you don't have the video for that, do you?
Yeah, no, we got the video.
All right, I want to see it. Let me see it.
Dear Mets fans, this is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. New York has been my home for the last 6 years, and through both the good times and bad, my love for you all in this place never wavered. This rehab and free agency process was both eye-opening and humbling. I was both flattered by all the outside interest, yet couldn't process what it would mean or how hard it would be to leave New York City. But after countless days of thought, I feel signing with the Angels is the best fit for me at this point in my career. I sincerely want to thank the fans for their unbelievable support. I wish we could have given you all even more to cheer about. Playing in New York has been the best experience of my life. As a kid from a small town in Texas, this place changed me forever. I'll never forget it, and I thank you all for it. I also want to thank the Mets organization for trading for me and blessing me with this opportunity. Thank you to my teammates, coaches, support staff, and all others I probably forgot to mention here. New York was my home for a long time, and I'll always appreciate how this Texan was welcomed there. I'll always be pulling for the Mets until I'm playing against you.
Syndergaard works a 1-2-3 inning in his first outing in the big leagues in nearly 2 years.
So, Bruce, my point to this is I believe I am going to get Noah Syndergaard on a show for us.
I thought you had my back.
Yeah, no, I got your back, all right. But the first thing you're going to do is apologize to this guy for what you said last week. So,
well, all right. So I was a little strong last week when I said, fuck Noah Syndergaard, And look, I will say this. He gave us, he went toe-to-toe with Madison Bumgarner in a 2014 wild card game. Okay, and nobody beat Madison Bumgarner in the playoffs back then. I think they lost 1-0. So I'll give him his credit. And that was a very nice. I had never seen that, Wally. I give you credit for not having my back. But you want me to apologize to the guy? He took $500,000 more to go to the Angels. He should have stayed with us. We paid him to do nothing except sit around and rehab. He owed us.
Should have paid him that extra $500,000. That's what they should have done.
Oh, that's great. All right, Wally, let's move into our final segment. And Wally, we've got a good name for this one too. We're going to call it Last Licks, and it's your last chance to divest yourself of anything. If you want to get something, it could be a double entendre. Nobody said licks had to be a swipe at somebody, but I'm going to begin there, Wally. Here's my last lick. Now look, I'm a Met fan. I'm not a fanboy. Okay, I'm a fan. There's nothing I would rather do, not including the important stuff in life, than sit and watch a Met game, especially it's a victory. Sunday Night Baseball, Wally, on ESPN. This is why the Peter Principle is strong. The Peter Principle means the higher you go in management, the stupider you get. Okay, if you ever hear that, that's what it means. ESPN has decided, Wally, to put the Mets and the Mariners on Sunday night. Okay, it's not bad. The game's in Seattle. It's picturesque. Both teams around 500. Wally, the Philadelphia Phillies are playing the Arizona Diamondbacks. Both are at or near the top of their division. It's a rematch of the National League Championship Series. Now, look, let me just be very honest with the viewers and the listeners. I can watch it any which way. It doesn't matter. So this does not affect me. But there are a lot of people who are going to watch the mediocre Mariners falling apart and the beloved Metsies and not be able to see Diamondbacks and Phillies Sunday night baseball. What a stupid decision.
Well, you know what? I don't know who makes the decisions, but yeah, I think I would rather watch the Diamondbacks and the Phillies because, hey, in New York, you can watch all the games. So, you can watch them against the Seattle Mariners, but for a big time game on ESPN, you're not going to have the Phillies on that given day, and you're going to have the Mets and the Mariners.
Bryce Harper?
Yeah,
look, man.
Who makes the decisions? I have no idea who makes the decisions, but I think it's a bad decision.
All right, so you're in line with me. Okay. Here's the last thing, Wally. It's preseason football time. Yeah, boy. The New York Giants, the G-Men, opening against the Detroit Lions. You would love Dan Campbell, head coach of the Lions. Well, he's your kind of guy. At his introductory press conference, he talked about getting knocked down. He didn't just talk about getting up, but biting kneecaps, literally biting kneecaps on the way back. Wally, I'm going to give you my first Feelers prediction. The Giants, thought to be going nowhere, are going to beat the Detroit Lions opening the preseason.
Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but let me tell you about preseason. I played this game a long time. As a baseball player, you are so ready to play baseball in the first 3 weeks of spring training. And as a position player, and spring training is all about pitching, but in football, these guys, and in baseball, in all sports today, they are training from the day that the season ends. We used to never do that. And when we didn't do that, we needed 3 weeks to get ready. So these players probably hate some of these preseason games because, you know what, let me get my 8 minutes in or whatever it is and get my legs under me, feel good about myself and get out of the game. And after you get into, I don't know, you can watch this game in the first 3 or 4 minutes when they're playing everybody that is supposed to be their starters. It's going to show you the whole game. So you don't have to watch the whole game.
Yeah, right.
In the end, people have to make the team. So, I'm not big into spring training. I'm not big into preseason for any sport. It's a matter of just getting in shape.
And my last question, how long was it before you were sick of preseason and ready to go north?
Oh,
2 weeks?
I'm telling you, it was 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay, so 3 weeks.
I was ready to go north and play baseball.
Yeah. Would you guys play 38 exhibition games? Man, you guys play too many exhibition games. Let's go. Let's get to the real thing.
Way too many. It's all about the pitching, and that's what you have to accommodate because you don't win a championship without quality pitching.
Love the show today, and Wally Backman has booked over the next 2 weeks. They're on the radar. They're all but confirmed. You don't want to miss next week. Mookie Wilson right here on this program. Can't wait to have the Mookster, one of my all-time 5 favorite New York Mets. And in 2 weeks, we're scheduled, hopefully, and again, it's on the radar. All we need is confirmation. The voice of the New York Mets took my job, the great Gary Cohen. That should have been my job, Wally. That was my job. He took it, man. Wally, great to be with you this week. Really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun. All right. For Wally Backman, it's 86, the Wally Backman Show from Soundville Media.